Morning, everybody. Bringing these cows up here to get them moved. Moving them up into this little catch area here, this little funnel area we've got. We're gonna try to get them trapped up in here. We got to get them, probably gonna work them Tuesday. That would be tomorrow, and then today's Monday morning. So we're gonna get them up in here because we've got probably about an acre of land in here that's got a little grazing left. So we're gonna let them graze that, and then we'll probably end up giving them a bale of hay tonight. So we'll let them graze what's in here. This is one of those areas that we never really brush hog, just because it gets really bad. It's just hard to get around. It's such a tight area. The way it's fenced off, it's a funnel. It's hard to get up in here. And then there's a little ditch in there right where you'd bring a tractor. Anyway, so it's just one of those spots that we don't really brush hog. But a lot of times what we'll do is we will mob them in here during the times that we're actually going to work them. So that usually works out pretty good. It's not quite as clean as brush hogging a pasture. It's never really quite as clean, but it always works and it gets you by. And so it is kind of convenient and nice being able to have that in your tool belt, that knowledge that the mobbing of them, works pretty good. And the one thing is, now we've actually cut our herd pretty well in half, and then we're not raising any heifers this year. And we also have less steers than we did last year. So we've actually got quite a bit less head this winter than we have in a long time. So it's kind of interesting the way it works. What you're looking at is actually everything that we're running this winter. We've gone down a pretty good bit. Always seems like there's always a couple of stragglers that come in last. They're just always the back of the herd. That bull right there, that white bull, he's always, you can tell he knocked one of his horns off. He's always fighting with this one right here. But anyway, that's one thing about that. When you do knock your herd down, it takes your mobbing ability down. It takes before we had enough cattle that when we ran them in here, they would actually pretty well mob this in one pass, just as they were climbing up that hill. They'd pretty well knock every bit of that down, and we would still leave them in for a little bit. Sometimes if we really, really wanted to hit it hard, we'd stretch a wire across there. So you run them all in, you stretch a wire across the top and make them stay here for just a little bit. So that's one thing you can do. But since we're at the end of the grazing season, we're actually not going to go that way with them, because we're taking the bulls and putting them in another pasture up that way. So we're actually going to take them back down this path and run backwards to another pasture in the back. So then what we'll do is we will run them down here, and that's when we'll do our mobbing, is when we come back down. But you have to kind of keep that in mind, that sometimes you have to work, sometimes you have to work with what you've got. We've got a smaller herd here, and the mobbing is just going to be a little bit different. It's a lot tighter. One thing that I will say for sure that with mob grazing is the smaller your herd gets, a lot of people say it's pretty well the same, whether you've got a small herd or a big herd. That's not 100% true. The smaller it is, especially if you got down to one cow, the smaller it is, the harder work you have to do, because there's more wires to set up. I mean, you could see how if I ran 300 cows in here, I wouldn't even have to set up a wire. This spot would be enough by itself, and if I ran one cow in here, I'd be setting wires up just constantly. I mean, they'd be in here for a long time. Now, you've got more grazing ability, but that's just something to keep in mind, especially for us, because we like to downsize our herd in the wintertime, and it's kind of something I advise, especially if you're a smaller operation and you're having to buy your hay. I like to downsize my herd so that I'm less subject to any problems with hay that I've purchased from other people that I may not know and things like that. Especially this year, it's been tough because we haven't been able to buy any hay from anybody that we've known. Now, we've been able to get some people to cut some hay for us, and that hay we knew what it was, but the problem with buying hay is sometimes hay, you're buying hay that you don't know. You don't always know who it is you're buying from. You don't always know what it is you're buying. So you got to keep that in mind. So that's why we like to downsize our herd. We've downsized more this year than we ever have because of the drought and just everything the way it worked out. But also, we did the downsizing when the price of cattle actually went up for a short while. We had a little spike right there in the beginning of the spring. And I mean, I pretty well knew that the drought was going to come. And I kind of figured on it being tough during the winter. And now they're calling for it being tough in the winter. And so, I mean, maybe I got lucky. I don't know. You don't really know for sure because I may have to buy back some of the cattle later. And if I do that, I may be buying back when it's high again too. So it's just it is a little bit of a gamble, but it's really knowing, researching, and staying connected. You want to stay connected with all the people around you. You want to stay connected with, you want to understand what the weather's going to be. You can't know it for sure. You can't know everything, but you can really look into a lot of this and make some decently educated predictions. One thing that I've always heard from some really smart people is never do what everyone else is doing. So if you do what everybody else is doing, guess what? If everybody's buying cows right now and you buy cows, the price of cattle is going to go up. It's going to be up. So you're going to be buying them when they're high. And if you sell cows when everybody else is selling cows, then guess what? The price of cows is going to be low because the market's going to be flooded. Okay, so just things like that. Like if you do exactly what everybody's doing at the moment that they're doing it, then you're going to, usually you're not going to come out on top. What I always say is you want to do what everybody else is. You want to be right next to what everybody else is doing. In other words, you want to follow along. You want to follow them, and then you want to kind of make some educated decisions off of that. But if you do exactly what they did, if I would have sold these cows exactly when everybody else was selling, man, the cattle market, because it dropped. After I sold them, it dropped. But when I sold them, it was a really good price. So it's just something you really have to watch. And you can educate yourself on what to do based on what everyone else is doing right now. Okay, now it's not going to tell you exactly, but it is something you can do. So, but anyway, as the cows go down, back to what I was talking about a minute ago, as your herd gets smaller, you have to adjust the way you do things. That's kind of part of it. So, but anyway, guys, I just wanted to kind of touch base with y'all, let y'all know what's going on. They're actually eating their acorns around that tree right there. We don't want them to do that. When it comes to your acorns, what I have found to be the best thing to do is to try to fence them out of your acorns while they're green. When they first drop, they're green. Okay? They're mostly green. That's when the toxin is the highest. So I will try to fence them out of the majority of the acorns. Like on the other side of this fence, there's a huge oak grove, kind of almost like right around in there, or kind of like an oak savanna, you might say. And it's just always, the whole hill is covered in acorns. Well, if you put them out into this whole 18-acre pasture, there's an 18-acre pasture right there. If I let them have that whole pasture, then they're going to go up to them trees and they're going to eat all of them oak tree, all of them acorns, okay? And that's just full of toxins. If they eat a little bit here and there, like right now they're getting a little bite, but then I'm going to, here in a minute when I get off the camera, I'm going to actually push them up the hill. So a couple little bites don't really hurt them too much. It's when they go to eating them and they stay eating them for several days, that really starts to hurt them and affect them. So you want to watch that. And now, to some degree, you can call. I've had some people ask me, can you call your cattle? Like, call out the ones that don't do well on acorn poison. Personally, I haven't found that to be, to some degree. You always call the ones that look, if there's one that look worse than the rest of the herd, yeah, obviously you want to do that. But cattle are just, it's a toxin. It's not good for them. It's just something that they can't handle. But here's what you can do. You can actually run a hot wire around those trees. So when I come back around here, rather than running a hot wire around those trees, what I'll do is, there's not very many weeds up there. So I'm going to run them straight down here, right past that one tree, right past where the acorns are falling, and I'm going to put one wire, just stretch it right across there. And then that way, I'm going to turn around here. That way I can mob this little pretty rough area. Right in here, I can just mob this and mob it, but there's no, you see there's no acorns. There's a little shade, even though we're pretty cool right now. You never know, in the south, sometimes you can get a hot day. So there's a little shade there. We'll have to run them some water because we've got a drought, and that wet area that's normally wet is not got any water, so we'll have to run them some water. That's not a big deal. We got a pond right up here. We can just siphon it right down and hook it to one of our temporary tanks. We've got videos on that. And we can just give them some water and mob them right in here. It'll work out great. Another thing you could do is actually run up and down this with a bale unroller and unroll some hay right in here. But anyway, so that's what you want to do is, when it comes to the acorns, is you want to fence them out while they're green. Once they turn brown, I stop worrying about it, okay? I'm still moving them around to where they're not eating the acorns every day, but I'm not fencing them out of it, okay? I just rotate them heavily like I always do, okay? But while they're still green, which is right now in the, you know, for us, that's around we're in the beginning of November, they're still green, okay? Once they've all fallen and you've gotten into deeper December, even closer to January, by then, all of those oak trees have turned, all those oak acorns have turned brown. And once they've turned brown, most of that toxin is gone. So I stop worrying about it. For me, that seems to work pretty good. I don't seem to have any problems. But that's one nice thing about that hot wire. You know, a lot of people, they don't mob graze. They say they don't have time and all like that. I'm like, whatever. But even if you don't like mob grazing, even if you don't want to do any of that, having a hot wire to where you can do little things like that, separate them out of the oak trees and things, man, that is huge. Just where you can do little things here and there. So even if you don't agree with me on that, even if you don't like the mob grazing or you don't think you have time, consider doing a little bit of hot wire movement just to have some light control over your cattle. It can be big, and it can really help out a lot. Because I mean, I know people, this is pretty bad, but I know people that lose cows to acorns every single year. And that's a problem in my mind. That's something that you need to, you know, you need to work on. I've seen some of my cows go downhill from the acorns. So far, crossing my fingers, and I'm not putting myself above anybody, because it can happen, okay? Cows, they go after them acorns. There's acorns everywhere, okay? So it can happen to anybody. I'm not putting myself above anybody at all when I say this. I'm just saying that so far I haven't lost any, and it's because when I start to see some cows going downhill, I move the cows, okay? I like to move them, and then, you know, I'm good after that. So, but anyway, guys, I'm gonna get off of that. I just wanted to touch on that a little bit with the acorns. I think it can be big, so we're gonna close this gate up. We're gonna get back to work here. We just gotta move them cows up there. We're gonna have to catch a steer, and then we're gonna get a steer brought in to be processed, and then we've got to work these cattle. We got to separate the bulls off. We're actually separating the bulls off a little bit later than we do normally this time, but it's just kind of how it worked out. It wasn't what we wanted, but it's just kind of how it worked. So it is what it is on that. But we got to separate our bulls out, and then after that, we're going to do any kind of work that we might need. We don't really have to do a whole lot of worming and stuff most of the time, but we do once we get them up into the working pens. We always want to check them. You always want to check your cows, because even if you get them to the point where they don't have to necessarily get warmer, doesn't mean that you don't want to check them. Doesn't mean there's not going to be a few here and there. We've got, you know, we've had it in the past where we would get all of our cows up. Most of them looked good, but once we got them up, we realized there was, you know, one or two that looked poorly. So what we do is we like to worm those one or two. We don't treat the whole herd based on what one or two has, you know. We'll treat those one or two, and then we usually put them on the list, and next time we get ready to do some calling, then those would be some of the ones that are on the list, and we call those later on down the road. But that has worked out pretty good for us. But you always want to watch that. You want to check all of them, get them up, look at them, separate everything. So, and that's why you do have to keep some, you have to keep some medicine around. I get some people that say, well, do you even buy medicine? It was like, well, I have medicine. I have to keep some stuff around. I mean, I know a vet for the most part. I can just get something from him, But it's not like that if an animal gets sick, we're going to treat it. Some people say, well, that's the problem with organic stuff is, you can't treat any of your animals. And it's like, well, it's not that we don't treat them. It's just that we don't treat the whole herd because of what one animal gets. That's all it really comes down to, is we're not treating everybody because of one animal's symptoms. Instead, we just get rid of that one animal. But we still treat that one animal. We're still going to treat it when it's there. It's still our animal. It's still our responsibility to take care of it. So we still take care of that animal, and we do what we need to with it to, we want to take care of it. The whole point is that, when you're doing stuff with a more natural approach, you don't treat everything based on what one animal got. Instead, that's what culling is for. You cull out the animals that is causing the problems. So, but anyway, guys, we're going to sign off here. I do feel pretty good about the herd we got right now. They are a black Angus Simmental, so they're a semi-Angus is what they are. That's not what that white bull is. That white bull's not got any semi-Angus in them. But these are semi-Angus, and they're not the best cattle in the world for grass-fed, but I got to tell you, they're not a bad start. Okay, I do have some people that tell me that are in the grass-fed industry. They hate on me because I'm running semi-Angus. Okay, no, they're not the best cattle in the whole world for grass-fed. So what I mean by that, the meat's fine. Okay, we're actually still coming out with good meat. What they mean by that is because they're a little bit harder to run through the winter. And they are. They're not quite like some of these South Pole and things like that. They're not quite like some of these other cattle. But for someone getting started, man, those cattle can be a good start. So I mean, if you're trying to get started in this, just start in whatever cattle you can afford. I would suggest not buying cattle that's huge, okay? These are semi-Angus that's actually a little bit smaller frame than some of the other ones. These are not those really, really big Simmental cattle, you know what I mean? I don't suggest going out and getting those 1,500 pound cows if you're trying to get into the grass-fed side of things. If that's what you're trying to do, then I don't suggest that, because it does take more hay to feed those animals, it takes more hay, and definitely it might, if you have to feed them, then you've got a problem. But I would suggest starting out looking for a smaller frame animal. The reason we went with the black is because the black and black baldies is what everybody wants in our side of the world. So it's like, well, we're trying to raise them on grass, but we still have to be able to sell these animals. We have to be able to sell them, and if you can't sell them, it don't matter how good the animal is. Doesn't matter how great it is. If you're getting docked, when you take them up to a sale barn or take them to a market somewhere, or even try to sell them like on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, try to sell them on Craigslist or anything like that. If you try to sell them wherever you're trying to sell them, different people try to sell them in different places. If you try to sell them and in your area you can't sell them, then it really doesn't matter what they look like. Because for whatever reason, people still get stuck on colors. They still get stuck on certain things, certain attributes. That's what they want in their area. That's what the market wants. That's what everybody wants. And so that is something that we're somewhat subject to. Now, when we send an animal in, when we process an animal and we can sell that animal like that, we don't have to worry about that. But we can't sell every cow we've got like that. We're not that big yet. So we still have to, that's why we still have black cattle, because of that right there. So anyway, guys, just a little bit of a backstory on that. So keep that in mind, that sometimes when you get started, you just got to do what you got to do. So anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off here. Y'all don't forget to like and subscribe.